Let's step back a little, take a look inside our true self, get comfortable in the uncomfortable, and let's embrace our reality. Life is tough, but so are you. Welcome to the Choose Your Attitude podcast with Nicholas Strand. Join Nick, author of Loving Someone Who's Dying, as he shares his experiences of life loss to life on the road as a traveling roadie. He and his guests will get into real topics while encouraging you to let go of the past, lift up the present, and fiercely build your better tomorrow. Let's get through this together. Now, here's your host, Nick Strand.
Hey, welcome to the Choose Your Attitude podcast, where we discuss real life stuff, learn to master the only aspects we can control in life, and use it as a tool to make today the best day of your life. Every morning we wake up with a choice to make. What attitude are you going to create your life with today? We chat with people of all walks of life, people sharing their own stories and tips of some of life's most difficult journey. There is no proper way to do this correctly, besides talking about it and walking through the process, no matter how difficult it may be. So let's train the elephant in the room together, but first, a word from our sponsors. Are you looking for some much needed motivation? Maybe a new way to feel inspired? We know that life is tough, but so are you. Finding that perfect shirt you've been dreaming of is a tough journey, but we have you covered. That's why we are here with Choose Your Attitude apparel. Wear it with confidence and remind yourself you're choosing a way to success. It is a constant reminder that you can share with others. Join the Choose Your Attitude community and share an attitude of style that others will want to be a part of. So get yours now at chooseyouratitude.com. Would you like to be a sponsor on the Choose Your Attitude podcast? Reach out to us at podcast@chooseyouratitude.com. Have you heard of the term 6 degrees of separation? The idea is that all people are 6 people or fewer away from each other. Back in 2006, I was on a flight from Spokane, Washington to Seattle, Washington. Sitting next to me was a friendly lady. Like most flights, sharing your journey with the person next to you, she shared she was headed to her movie premiere in Seattle. To my surprise, later the blockbuster hit Freedom Writers with lead actress Hilary Swank hit theaters. The movie is about a dedicated teacher in a racially divided Los Angeles school with a class of at-risk teenagers deemed incapable of learning. Instead of giving up, she inspires her students to take an interest in their education and planning their future. She assigns reading material that relates to their lives and encourages them all to keep journals of themselves. Those journals not only formed a movie, but formed the Freedom Writers Foundation. Erin Gruwell, that dedicated teacher, was that amazing, inspiring lady that sat next to me on that flight in 2006. Freedom Writers became a movie I adored. As Choose Your Attitude podcast formed and we reached out for guests, Erin Gruwell was at the top of the list. We reached out to Erin a week prior to the George Floyd protests. It was like fate set us up to connect and discuss the current situation. Here's our chat. I'm very excited to have Erin Gruwell from the movie Freedom Writers. How are you?
I am so honored to be with you, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I need to rephrase that. It's the Freedom Writers Foundation. The movie was about the foundation and your journey. But kind of a crazy story. I'm not really sure if you realize this, but in 2006, 2007, you were flying from Spokane to Seattle, and I was on the same flight, and I can't remember. I think I was in front of you, and there was a kind gentleman that you guys were talking to, and I kind of was talking with you, and you had talked about the premiere. I had no idea what it was. No idea. And I actually remember going home and telling my wife, like, yeah, she said there was this premiere. And then a year later, no, you're good. And then a year later, all of a sudden, Freedom Writers comes out.
Well, I love it. I'm that annoying person on a plane that talks to everyone. I think people probably wince when they sit next to me and think, "Oh God, I just want to watch my movie or I just want to read my magazine." But I think at that time, I do remember it perfectly. I think I'm an ordinary teacher
Yep.
who had extraordinary students. So to be that like nerdy English teacher who was portrayed by a 2-time Academy Award winning actress, Hilary Swank, was a pinch me moment then. It's still a pinch me moment now. So I was probably just so insecure on that plane and having imposter complex that when this film comes out in the world, that forever people are going to be disappointed when they meet me, the nerdy teacher, and think that they're going to meet actually Hilary Swank. So I was probably both lamenting and terrified and excited as well. I think we didn't know then how the world would take it, and we are thrilled that that it still resonates. In the middle of pandemics and protest, it's trending on Netflix. And our 20th anniversary of the book just came out, which ages me. But the amazing thing is we're still that kind of slow and steady. We're not that meteor that burned too bright and burned out. We just, we're still the little train going down the track.
I love it. No, I think it kind of says a lot. I remember, like you said, you were very soft-spoken. It almost, it resonates with the idea that, don't judge people without knowing their full story. And so many of us, especially in this time, we use what we know to judge others as opposed to learn. And it kind of resonates in the idea that, here you are, this powerful person, and all these people have no idea the journey or what you're kind of creating. And you kind of did the same thing with your students, is you believed in your students without even knowing their full story. But at the same time, you gave them the opportunity to speak, and you listened as opposed to judged right away.
Thank you for saying that, because something just happened a few days ago. That reminds me of what it was like to walk into that classroom all those years ago with, I've been told by Holocaust survivors that if we don't learn our history, we're doomed to repeat it. So in Los Angeles, we had the 1992 civil uprising with the Rodney King verdict. And it was scary. And my students were those kids with the Molotov cocktail in hand, those kids who were going into stores, or those kids that were cowering in a bathtub, not wanting to be shot or have their house burned. So during the recent uprising, again, Long Beach was one of those communities that had the National Guard come in. It was one of those communities where there was beautiful, peaceful protest, but also the devastation of fires and looting. So freedom riders have PTSD and triggers today like we did then. But all of this in the midst of a pandemic. So when the pandemic happened, the freedom riders and I realized everything that we have always done is in person. We touch people, we stand in front of classrooms. Part of my class and my teaching was very frenetic, and in this age of social distancing and staying at home, the world as we know it is upside down. So we've recreated ourselves, we reimagined ourselves, and tried to figure out how do we do these things in a virtual world or online. That's why being on your podcast is so exciting. Now people can listen, and that's something that I didn't have as a teacher, the ability to have podcasts then. So there was this beautiful student recently. We started a program that we would be able to connect the most vulnerable among us with people who had access in this trying time. Because our fear was, we being freedom riders, that during a pandemic, that people would fall further and further behind with that social economic divide, the social emotional issues, and just technology in general. So we were able to tap into kids of great wealth and privilege to be able to donate computers to kids who were the most vulnerable among us, many of whom had lost their families, were in foster care. And so just a few days ago, we were going to merge these two worlds. And what I didn't want is for the kids of great privilege just to have a handout. Like, here's a brand new computer and knock yourself out. I said, no, it's more than that. You have to give not just technology, but what I really want is your time and I want your talent. I want you to work with these middle school and high school kids to create a relationship in the way that the Freedom Riders have become a family. So there was this beautiful boy in our first meeting who was in our corner box on a Zoom call. And he was just doing this messy cry the entire hour. Because I kept saying, you were chosen, you were selected, you were wanted. And all of these like affirming words that I used to say to the Freedom Riders, that you were wanted and chosen and selected and picked. So at the very end, I said to him, how does this feel? And I just opened it up. And his teacher was part of the Zoom. And this beautiful boy who had witnessed both a murder-suicide where his father murdered his mother and then took his own life. And this boy returned, a middle school student, to this horrific scene and has struggled since. But when I gave him the opportunity to speak, being chosen, wanted, selected, picked, all of those affirming words, it was the most beautiful soliloquy. It was, I've never been picked. I've never been selected, and this is how it feels. So not only was he crying, we were all crying. Beautiful way to end this incredible virtual Zoom. The phone rings 2 minutes afterwards, and his teacher said, oh my God, Erin, you have no idea. That was divinity. That was serendipity. Wow. Because this young boy never speaks. He grunts. He doesn't have complete sentences. He hides in the corner. And the fact that he was almost Shakespearean in this moment, what happened? And I said, I don't know. But it's a mirror to what happened with Freedom Riders. When you love on someone the way you, Nick, loved on Brianna, when you don't see the labels, when you don't see the tragedy, you see the triumph. People's spirits soar. And I think that was why it was so important for me to be a part of your podcast, is everything that your message is about is choice. Choosing an attitude, choosing how we go about our daily lives, making decisions. And so what I honor that you do is what I try to do in a very small way with kids, giving a voice to the voiceless.
I as you say that, I just my hairs are just just butterflies. But that right there exemplifies something huge, and something huge that I'm experiencing, and something that you did so great at. And I call it learning to be comfortable in the uncomfortable, and that's trying to step outside yourself for once and listening to what they have to say. And I've noticed in my journey and what's going on is most people react so fast, they don't even listen, or they don't even ask for that information. And so when somebody comes to a person for help, just like so many of these people have, is that we're so quick to provide that, to get into our comfort zone, to share that help. And we silence them before they're even able to express where they stand. And for you to be able to, that's what I heard in that message about, your kid is he finally was able to be listened and I don't want to say dehumanized, but I think you understand kind of what I'm saying, in the fact that, a lot of the times to actually help someone means to kind of get in that uncomfortable zone with them.
Absolutely. What a great saying. Comfortable in the uncomfortable. I might have to use that with my students.
Yes.
What I feel that I, as a teacher, I'm also a student, and that duality every day is knowing that role is when I can be a student and a student can become the teacher. My father used to have this great saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. And in that moment, that beautiful boy became all of our teachers. Even though he was in a Zoom call with his own teacher, we were learning, we were processing. I think what the pandemic has taught me and so many others is this is a time of being uncomfortable. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much ambiguity. So many teachers at this very moment still don't know if they're going to go back to their classrooms that they know and love. Kids are at home not knowing, am I going to go back to school? Is it going to be a hybrid? Am I still going to be doing all of my homework in my pajamas at home? So I've been really struggling with this feeling of being uncomfortable to shake me out of my comfort zone, because I have been that classroom teacher that stands in front of people and I'm animated and I can call people out and I can hug a student when they walk in. I can't do that with Zoom. So I'm learning to adapt, and I have this amazing foundation. We call it the Freedom Hour Foundation. With my trick is to surround myself with people who are just smarter and more talented than I. And through osmosis, I just get a little bit of their brilliance. So I always joke with them that when people have a baby, they baby-proof a house. They cover up the light switches and the rough edges so that everything is safe. Well, my office have baby-proofed, i.e. Erin-proofed, our entire audience and our entire office, because they don't trust me with technology.
Oh, geez.
So even to talk to you, I was told where to sit. I was told, don't touch anything.
I love it.
Just speak. And that's hard. In a classroom, I know my boundaries in a classroom. In this online space, it is terrifying. So I'm now a student learning all of these things and understanding why they've told me don't touch, because everything will go away with a single touch. The Zoom will go away. The podcast will go away. So it's wonderful to be able to say out loud that I am uncomfortable and comfortable in an uncomfortable time.
I think that's huge. And it's, with me, the subject was death, and losing my mom and losing Brianna. And it's so uncomfortable. And then now we have COVID, we've got, the civil unrest. And a lot of people get into that kind of, instinctual reaction, where they don't even really conceptualize what's happening or try to, get in there in that mindset of understanding outside. Now, as you were talking about feeling, being a student as well as a teacher, when you started to teach in this environment, how did you, with what's going on right now, I think one of the things that I've noticed with friends and such as I try to learn more is you get a resistance. And in the movie, it exemplified that resistance. You had the resistance from the kids accepting you, to the teachers, the white teachers accepting you, because you're trying to pull these two together, but everybody has been so comfortable to not hit that comfortable zone. And so you get this kind of instinctual reaction. How did you break through that when you kind of had that you had confidence, but I don't want to call it confidence, because like you said, you were learning, but how did you step inside that zone and break through the resistance on both ends to get to that, where we are now?
That's a great question then, and it's still relevant now. I think that what I had experienced as a student myself was very different than what my students had gone through up until that point. Right. I love school. I was the kid that not only raised my hand, I raised both. I was destined to have perfect attendance and be teacher's pet and bring an apple. And if they wanted a 5-paragraph essay, well, I would double it and do 10. I was that nerdy, obnoxious kid. What I realized is for my students, it was Maslow's hierarchy. It was survival first and foremost. It was, where am I going to eat? Yeah. What am I going to eat? Where am I going to sleep? Am I going to be safe in a city that had a riot, that had racial inequality, and a horrible social economic divide? So what I realized very early is I have to pivot personally, because before I do a Shakespearean sonnet, I have to know about Tupac and A Rose in Concrete. I have to make this real and relevant and somehow, some way create a relationship with those who I'm teaching, because they don't trust me yet. They don't respect me yet. They don't see education yet as an equalizer to an unfair playing field. So for me, every single day, every single hour, every single minute was adapting, pivoting, being flexible, being on my tiptoes, and then being able to process, crying the entire drive home and saying, I didn't reach them. I screwed up. What do I do differently tomorrow? And I think when you can have a self-awareness and be accountable, that is a huge ability to move forward. And sometimes we can be our own worst critics. I admit that. But I realized that if I'm not breaking through to them, I'm doing them a disservice. So who are they and where do they come from and what do they know? So that I can integrate that into what I want to teach, where we need to go, and what will serve them later. And that's exactly what I'm doing now on this, when the world is upside down. We're not in a new normal. No. So in this age of technology, I haven't found... Sorry. In this age of technology, I have not found my new normal yet. Yeah. Because if I was to see you in person, I would just want to give you a huge bear hug. Yes. And I would just, all of those things that we as empaths do is do the hug, the nod, the gesture that we can't do on a podcast, or we can't do sometimes in a virtual space. So I love that you continuously try to do that as well with those that you are humbly serving. And we are in the service business. Yep. We are service providers. I had to figure out, how do I have my students open up and say to this short story, to this poem, to this essay, and realize they are storytellers. Yeah. They are authors. Yep. They have something to write. They have something to say. Their words can be a legacy. Would you say that some of it too, you I don't want to call it a popularity contest, but we get a lot of people, and I always revert to kind of that comfort word again, but they don't want to enter an area because they don't want to be publicly humiliated. And I think using that word is not fair, because it's a negative word. But I guess what I'm saying is do you think you being so vulnerable, showing your failures when you tried, and just instead of taking it as a personal offense and using it as a way to fuel yourself to keep going, do you think that is kind of what helped? And kind of what I'm going here is trying to help other people, kind of beat through that very uncomfortable situation. And, some would call you a hero in that sense. But I think, Brianna kind of said the same thing, is that I don't want to take the words from you, but, it's like you said, you're learning. So you're going through it. But I guess to word that in one question is to display that vulnerability, did that help give you acceptance to create that
oh, well, she's not kidding. Like she really wants to help us?
That's a great question. I think that so much of our story, it's an our and an us and a we, because I still
Yeah.
see the Freedom Riders every day. All these
Oh,
years
wow.
later, they are my family of choice. They are my
Yep.
children. They are they are they are my everything. They are the wind between everything that we do that elevates and lifts. I think, in society, sadly, there are so many stigmas and stereotypes about gender,
Yep.
about race, about economics, and we're seeing that play out now with these protests that are now 60 days out from the first initial protest after George Floyd's death. And each of these protests have morphed for the community they're in and the environment they're in. But people are standing up and saying, see me,
Yep.
hear me, I matter. And so I think in my classroom, what I had to do before there was a protest, there was, a kid flipping me off, or a paper airplane coming my direction, or a probation officer, coming to take these kids away. So I had to see them, like really see them. I had to hear them. And when
Yep.
you hear them, sometimes that's very uncomfortable, because maybe
Yep.
they're going to say things that are not touchy-feely, that make you feel good. You're gonna be called names. I came from a very pristine community. I grew up in a gated community, so I was called names in multiple languages that I didn't even know. I'd have a cheat sheet to
Wow.
understand what I was being called
Wow.
every moment of every day.
Yeah.
I say that because what I realize is there's pain behind this. How do I make that pain become a purpose? How do I take that pain and have it be my passion to make education relevant, to understand why they are so angry, why they push away rather than pull closer? And so it was very humbling for me to be able to cry in front of my students, to want to hold them dear, to say, I don't have all the answers. I'll find them out somehow, some way,
Yep.
but we're in this together. And, just being so almost painfully transparent
Yep.
and shamelessly optimistic simultaneously
Yep.
was something that really served me, and I hope served them. But it was all of that rawness and that realness that really, interconnected us.
I use the words embrace your reality. And I like to, I think you kind of say it there too, is like, I really don't feel that anybody's past should judge them, that it's, I say it's not about the what, it's the why. The what is usually a reaction of why, and that why is, where we can actually get somewhere. And it's great to see, someone like you and the foundation kind of working through that and actually, helping people share that rawness, because that rawness is kind of that vulnerability that allows you to then become, I'd almost say fearless, or, and you're learning to walk into what most would and do systematically shut down and judge, when, you've kind of done a great job of showing that just because what doesn't mean that the perspective of somebody else is a completely different story. And I think that's really important, with what you're doing, and with the journals that you created to allow them to, share that voice. Yeah.
I think, well,
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
pair off that, because I think you and I both, as writers, that's
Yep.
when something is out in the world, I have your book here, so I will hold
Aw.
it close to my heart. But
Yay.
when you write something, you set yourself up for interpretation, and
Yep.
then you send it out in the world like a message in a bottle, and people can interpret, but you feel very exposed. You feel very raw and vulnerable, and suddenly it's like these words are naked on a page.
Yep.
I had to ask my students to write. You wrote. I've written. And that's scary when you send it out into the world like a message in a bottle. And there was a beautiful freedom writer storyteller that very early on wrote about having cystic fibrosis, my beloved Todd. So Todd walked into my life at the age of 14 and had been in the hospital since birth. He was the kid diagnosed by those doctors, very much like Brianna, who gave them that label, that stereotype, that death sentence. You're not going to make it.
Yep.
And what I am so proud of what Todd was able to do is have two stories in our book. The story at the beginning of being that kid who wasn't supposed to make it past his 14th birthday, and that kid who was going to graduate and did. And Todd had these really high ambitions. He wanted to graduate with honors, which he did. He wanted to get a driver's license, and he ended up getting like a keys to a Mustang, and he wanted to go to college, and he did with a scholarship. And shortly after he graduated, and the book was about to come out, a few months before it hit the shelves, the Freedom Writers and I were going to take this amazing trip to go to all of the places that we had read about, such as Anne Frank's attic in Amsterdam, and to concentration camps in Poland, and another author's incredible journey in Bosnia-Herzegovina in the city of Sarajevo. So that was the eye on the prize. We were going to go for an entire year when the Freedom Writers were now in their first year of college. The idea was that they were going to mentor younger kids to be writers and storytellers. And a few days before we left, Todd lost his battle. And we were crestfallen because all of those milestones that he had said in high school, I'm going to graduate, I'm going to get my driver's license, I'm going to go to college. Once he reached those goals, he just upped the ante. And there were new goals and other ways to aspire, just like Brianna. There was a beautiful thing that happened that I think you know because you live in that world of being open to moments of divinity. I love you use that word in your own book. Yep. In the film Schindler's List, the very last scene while they're rolling the credits is original Oscar Schindler survivors place a rock on Oscar Schindler's gravesite. It's a very sacred moment where it's honoring the past and the present. And when we went to Europe, the Freedom Writers wanted to prove that our beloved Todd, he was part of that journey. And so throughout this journey, I watched Freedom Writers collect a little pebble outside of Anne Frank's home, that attic. When we went to Auschwitz, they collected the perfect rock that was next to the railroad tracks. When we were in Bosnia-Herzegovina. So clearly their luggage was much heavier on the way back. But the night that our book came out, unbeknownst to me, they had gathered all of these rocks. I'm going to get emotional. And invited Todd's mother and wanted her to know that Todd was very much with us when we were at Anne Frank's attic. And here's the stone to prove it. And Todd was with us holding hands when we were at Auschwitz. And here's the perfect rock to prove it. And Todd was very much with us when we were in Sarajevo. And we did the messy cry. We just wept. And his mother took those beautiful stones that could have just looked like rocks and realized that Todd will always be a part of our family. Todd will always be a part of our story. So knowing that you are the living legacy of Brianna, knowing that everything and every breath that you take, you have taken something that Brianna was a wounded healer, and she healed you. And now you get to heal others. I think that's an amazing thing and an amazing reason that I was immediately drawn to you and your story. And I love that you wrote a book. I love that you created a foundation. I love everything that you do.
Oh, thank you.
Because you've kept her alive.
I appreciate that. It means that it's I think it's, both of those kind of resemble in the fact of, you know, we get lost when everybody dies, and that's one of those vulnerability real things, and it's hard to break through that when that happens, and another thing, like in your story that you just shared, is the kids, to most, have this really hard edge face to them, and you were able to break through and get that heart out, and actually share what these people truly are, and I think you would agree that it's so inspiring as you go through your own journey that it gives you fuel to keep going, and that's what I see is I'm living too. I'm not sharing this is how it's supposed to be done. It's more of, I know what it feels like. And so I want to be able to share that to somebody who's struggling, and to feel, like you to see that, to hear your students kind of like, how does that, I guess, connecting back to you, like to see your kids actually flourish from that, yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. I think that I often use this analogy that hurt people hurt people. And I had students who would rather put up their fist than pull out a pen. Used weapons of whether it was a switchblade or a gun in a community that had over 120 homicides in a single year. So what I understood is that for a lot of them, they were numb or anesthetized, and they didn't want to feel because feelings are overwhelming. Feelings make us feel vulnerable. Feelings make us feel weak. And for kids who need to have a front and a facade, you got to shove those feelings down. But I realized that early on I had, very tough boys.
Yep.
All these years later, after those boys were able to be cracked wide open and put back together, is they are the most emotive, the most emotional. And if you were to see them on the street, you probably would be a little nervous. They're big and they're burly and they've got, an attitude and a swagger, but, they're boys. And so ironically, I connected first and foremost with the toughest of the kids.
Yep.
Because they were the ones that were sent away and they were the ones that were dismissed. I had all the kids that had the rap sheets, the probation officers, had done time and thought that's my destiny. To this day, those are the most beloved. If you see Freedom Riders, and I had one come over yesterday to our office, and he gave me a hug, and in this time of social distancing, I got a little nervous. I was like, oh my God. He used to call me Miss G. Now he calls me Mama G. So traditionally we just hug. Yeah. And are we allowed to hug while we're supposed to be social distancing? And what I love about that, even in my existential crisis, am I supposed to give Carlos a hug, is that for a lot of these boys, they didn't have moms that hugged them. Carlos was abandoned at 6 months old. And so he dealt with attachment disorder, and being abandoned had stayed with him. And so all these years later, he still needs that connection, that relationship. And so feelings, when you actually are vulnerable to feel, you have to be able to do it in a safe space. You have to be able to do it where someone doesn't take advantage of you and make you feel more vulnerable. That we all fall, but if we fall forward, that's the most important thing. So I always wanted Freedom Riders to do just that. And I think the film captured some of those really beautiful moments of us being the most vulnerable, whether it was, standing on the line during the line game, having a toast for change, and throwing your ideas out into the universe, writing your journals and having us read them. There was a lot of moments of just raw vulnerability, but in that safe space, what we were able to create is it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to need that hug. It's okay to not feel so strong right now because we're going to build you up together.
You make like you hear a lot of people always say, "Oh, well, you got to be positive. You got to be positive," and that's one of those things that I keep. It like you said is sometimes being positive is to be able to be real within and actually be able to stand there with somebody and share where you stand. Just because you say that or you feel that does not mean that you are not thinking positive. One more area I wanted to kind of touch was, here you are a teacher and you have these students, but then you have the pressure of family. For other entrepreneurs or for people who, like you want to help, but for some reason in help, you also get the resistance. If you were to kind of share something to those to of how you kind of got through that or filtered through, some of those, like I relate to your father in the movie, and the resistance. It's one of those things of being aware. He loves you, but at the same time, you see this love and heart that you're going to be able to create. How did you weigh, those two forces?
That's a great question, and I love that the film touched on some of those things. That there was that duality of the classroom and also, personal lives, and it was duality of the teacher and also the student. So, both storylines were showcasing the educational aspect and also the elements of our real lives. And that was hard. I wasn't prepared to have all of that be a microscope to my own life. I didn't feel comfortable with that. I think that with my father, first and foremost, my father just, like any dad, wants you to be safe, to be productive. My father was probably my biggest cheerleader.
Yep.
So in his mind, it was, you can go all the way. You can run a company if you so choose. You could be a partner at a law firm. You can do it all. And oftentimes in our society, and we are seeing this now, in COVID, I love that we are finally paying homage to people that are often invisible, and we've called them essential. There's something so beautiful and noble at the grocery store that I go to every Saturday. They actually wear these wonderful shirts that the grocery store gave them that said, "I'm essential." But oftentimes there are hierarchies, and I hate that in a hierarchy that we place more on people that we perceive to be at the top, the entrepreneur, the lawyer, the CEO, not just the care worker, the janitor, the grocery store clerk. All of those things make up the fabric and the tapestry of our lives. So I like that now that we are paying homage, and in the midst of the pandemic, people were outside their windows and on their balconies, banging pots and pans for nurses and doctors and everyone that was serving and sacrificing for people during this horrific pandemic. Yeah. I think that there was this perception that my father thought that if you're a lawyer, that's sexier in the world. If you make more money, you'll have more access. If you have a better house, then it's better for you. So there was all of these things with labels because I grew up in a gated community. My father had a really sexy job. My father drove really sexy car. All of that was what I knew. My father's fear was, if you choose to be a teacher in a community that was hard hit by homicides and riots, you're not going to be safe, first and foremost, and you're not going to make any money, which was actually true. Teachers, unfortunately, are overworked and underpaid. But for me, what's not sexy is the car, the gated community. all of those accoutrements. I drive a 2007 Prius to this day. I don't live in a gated community to this day. There's so many things that, for me, what's sexy is knowing that a student that I had 20 plus years later, yesterday, could call me mama, give me a hug in the middle of a pandemic, and is still a part of my life. It wasn't one and done. Here's your grade, here's your score, you're out. So I think that for my dad, he had to adapt, and he had to meet Carlos and my students and realize that my daughter doesn't care about the car. My daughter doesn't care about the paycheck. My daughter cares about relationships. And that to me was more important. And I think that we as a society need to see everyone's passion and everyone's calling and get away with some of those hierarchies.
Yeah. I agree. I think one of the very powerful things that I would relate to both this story and then also with Brianna is she was also clever in the fact that, she helped. She was an advocate for other cystic fibrosers. And one of the things that she always did is she advocated for those who didn't have a voice. But one of the things I would call it pillow talks. And when we would lay down, she would actually discuss, some of those things. And one of those things that she discussed was, sometimes we are forgotten. And so the things that mean more are less about the material and more about the memories you create and more about the legacy you create. So, for example, doing this whole entire journey of her life and sharing it to the world, but then at the same time creating Choose Your Attitude, Create Your Life as a way that, help people. So as a connection to that, I wanted to kind of see your thoughts of how that Choose Your Attitude, Create Your Life, when you hear that, how does that interpret to you? And yeah.
Well, first of all, Brianna is clearly with us today. So we have to start there by paying homage to a legacy well lived.
Yes.
I am an English teacher, so I love action verbs. Choose and create are very empowering words. It's up to us. And I believe in empowerment. I believe in actualizing things. I always say to the Freedom Riders, we're going to speak our truth, we're going to tell our narrative, and we're going to put things in the universe. And it became a joke. One of the Freedom Riders said, they call me Miss G. If Miss G says we're going to the moon, somebody better call NASA. And it was always that we were choosing and creating what we wanted. And so the fact that Brianna has created a legacy that's based on choice, it's based on creation, it's based on self, is incredible, because we can start anew and start over every single moment of every single day. That's scary for a lot of folks who want a roadmap and want to be told what to do and how to do it. It's also very liberating for people who don't want to live with restrictions. And so I hope that she was able to fuse that with you, that you now, Nick, can create. You now can choose. And I think in that positivity, it's got to be contagious for others.
Oh, for me especially. I mean, the infectious, I like to call it, not to use with this current times, but no, for sure. I love that. I wanted to talk about, so one of the things you did was Toast for Change. And I noticed that you guys kind of have a thing going on right now where you guys have talked about empowerment, kindness, gratitude, perseverance, forgiveness, compassion, understanding, hope, education. So I wanted to kind of do one in regards to with attitude. And I wanted to kind of, as an ending to this, kind of help kind of sum it all up. And kind of what I put together was with attitude, no matter our past, We get to choose every day the attitude for that day. And I feel it's less about what has happened in your past, and more the effects of making to become a better person every day. So no matter what has happened before, it's about creating the energy to create a better tomorrow. But also doing that now, because tomorrow isn't always guaranteed. And I think that's a huge thing with attitude as well, is that I don't see attitude as, happy, sad. I see attitude as I will, we're going to do this. And that comfortable in the uncomfortable. And we are unstoppable. We can learn to understand and accept others. And by being able to listen and comprehend somebody, and I often say too, to feel means to feel something outside of yourself. And so to open that up. So with that, I just wanted to I have a little.
Well,
Yes.
my colleague who has been sitting next to me, not only has he been shushing the dogs, who I apologize have been a part of our wonderful exchange, he also just handed me a little sparkling water.
I love it.
So this is. I wish we could. That's where the virtual. I wish we could do a little salute, a little cheers in person.
But so a toast for change for that, and that with everything going on, that with the complete attitude, that we've seen in our world, especially in America, that we can all kind of open up and realize there's a bubble outside of us, and to use that as our civil duty, to kind of help others even, learn. So with that, a toast for change.
Well, I'd like to do a toast to change to you and your amazing followers. So my toast to change for you, Nick, is to continue to be the change that that Brianna wanted you to be. That as Gandhi said, may we be the change we wish to see in the world. You are that change. You are fearless. You jump on planes, you fly around the globe, you stand on stages, you talk to students, and you inspire them to feel, and deeply so, to honor those that we hold dear. And even if those that we hold dear are through memories, through stories, through photos, through peacock feathers, all of those beautiful things, those memories of pillow talk, those memories of people pushing us to be bigger and bolder and better. That is what your mother did. That is what your wife did. And that is what you now do for others. So I chose to be a part of your incredible network because I believe in what you do. I believe in the power of choice to say, I'm going to choose my attitude. I'm going to create the life I want, because it's empowering and it allows us to dare to dream. And so thank you, Nick, for allowing me in these times of uncertainty and ambiguity with the world upside down now to remind myself that I too have to be empowered to make choices as a teacher, to create a new classroom, to continue to give a voice to the voiceless. And so my toast to you is to humbly serve beside you and honor the legacy of who brought us together, your beautiful wife, because she is clearly with us at this moment.
Yep. Thank you. Is there anything else? I would love to maybe some information on where they can find out more information from the foundation. And
sure.
I do know too that the 29th, you guys have that fundraiser. Is that going to be a continuous fundraiser?
It is. It's online and it'll live. Okay. It'll live forever. But
perfect.
For anyone that wants to know about our story and read about Todd, I love that. Yes. That cystic fibrosis has been a part of our story from the very beginning. Our book originally was called The Freedom Writer's Diary. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary with 20 new stories to the original book. So the Freedom Writer's Diary is out in the world. It became, as you mentioned earlier, the subject of this amazing movie with Hilary Swank. And I think what I love about the movie is you could find it anywhere. You could find it on Netflix or Amazon. I spend a lot of time with kids who have bootleg copies. So however you find it and may it speak to you. Yeah. We also just recently won an Emmy for a documentary of our story that was told by the actual storytellers, the Freedom Writers. It's called Freedom Writers Stories from the Heart. And we chose the platform of PBS because it's free by, for, and about the people. So people can actually download it for free on their PBS website or watch it on PBS. But what I love about our foundation is we are still living and breathing this mission and message every day. So our website is the freedomwritersfoundation.org, and it is alive and breathing. And what I love about the Freedom Writers is they are still very much a family, pivoting in these tough times to create ways for people to have light in dark times, whether it's through curriculum or through being guests on podcasts like your own, to be the podcast guest of the Freedom Writers podcast, which has been really fun and exciting to hear them be the storytellers. So what we love is partnering with causes that we believe in. And Nick, we desperately and dearly believe in you. We believe in choose your attitude, and we believe in this mantra of create your life. May we all leave this podcast making choices and creating in honor of that legacy.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I love it. Well, all right. Thank you for being on here. I think that sums it up. It has been an honor to speak with you and get so much information. And it's amazing to connect the dots. And finally, the 3 degrees of separation is crazy. And fate is pretty crazy. That 10 years ago 10 years ago we
was it? Yeah. It's not so crazy. Like, I believe that it was accidentally on purpose. We were on that plane, heading into the world, and both of our future was, unforeseeable. But I think that it was a chance meeting that was anything but chance, that we were brought together to be together. And I think it was a moment of serendipity, or as you beautifully wrote in your book, divinity. I believe in those moments of divinity. You just gotta trust. And so when you sent your book to us and I devoured it, it was a moment for me to realize that the universe was speaking to both of us.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To reach out to Nick and the Choose Your Attitude community, find us on social media at Choose Attitude Create Life. Share your attitude with the world with merch guaranteed to encourage at ChooseYourAttitude.com. Be sure to share us with friends, family, and colleagues. And while you're at it, leave us an uplifting review. We'd very much appreciate it. Check back for new episodes. Until next time, choose your attitude, create your life.